Hello everyone, welcome to Liam's Lyceum. I'm your host Liam, aka Himbar, and today I have a different video for you. Hopefully it is informative, and it'll be different because it's almost going to be a lecture. For those who are familiar to my channel, I don't do a lot of those. I've done some, but I wanted to talk about a topic that I find interesting, that I've done a little bit of research on, not much. So I wanted to say that this is kind of an introduction to an idea. And I'll go into a little bit on my sources, right? Because I'll mostly just be, for the most part, reading through a short essay I wrote. But I find it interesting. And that essay is titled "The Chauvinistic Love of Words." The essay is really on Romanticism, or romantic nationalism, this theme of Romanticism and philology. So let's get into it, and again I'll kind of look at maybe where we can go from here, and again my sources at the end if you want to know those. So anyways, when Romanticism was born from the Enlightenment, so were many of the soft sciences, fields of anthropology, archaeology, and philology among them. It was this last discipline that was particularly potent in the 19th century, when Romanticism romantic thought flourished. The themes of philology would come to be associated with nationalism, at least today. Such a politicized association would prove its downfall. This rise is exemplified in the fairy tale collector, mythologist, and philologist Jacob Grimm. Later German politicians, in a continuation of the Romantics, would go further with such tools for the sake of national identity, and with them reach the point of no return, when some of the greatest atrocities of the modern era would be committed, with philology only being a minor victim. Such a fate did not rid philology of its usefulness. Philology is little known today, and so deserves a definition. And I did give a brief, if you want a longer definition, I did give a brief introduction video probably a couple months ago now. But the word itself denotes a love of words, from ancient Greek philos and logos. It is a literary study incorporating knowledge of text and language, including dialects, both historical and contemporary. This diachronic method and focus on text distinguishes it from scientific study of language, which is sans texte, and generally synchronic, of linguistics. It is not quite literary criticism because the focus on language and its particulars, right? Philology, if known at all, is generally associated with boring old texts and similarly described bespectacled Germans or those trained in Germany. While not a wholly inaccurate association, the flourishing of philology was during a time of nationalism and much literary soul. This theme of nationalism can be seen in a lot of other romantic stuff, like Victor Hugo's Les Miserables, even, or Eugene Delacroix's Victory Leading the People, which is a painting, or even William Morris's Germanic settings in his prose romances, translations, art, etc. So it's a pertinent topic, as even though philology would largely die in the postmodern era, it was a direct result of the Romantics' obsession with authority, which was perceived to come from the simple rather than the cold and artificial past that would get it there. Ancient language played a central role in Romantic theories of authentic experience. The past is often enigmatic, especially in prehistory. Philology successfully showed a relation between languages spoken from Iceland to India by billions of people. This language family is known as Indo-European, and most of India, excluding the Dravidian languages in Europe, excluding Finnish, Hungarian, Estonian, Basque, Sami, and Maltese. Maybe I forgot one. That should cover most of the bases there. Today, speak languages from this family. There's some gap in between too, right? Like Turkish and the Semitic languages in the Middle East as well. But questions of the origin of the large Indo-European language family would deeply resonate in Germany, where popular interest in the history of the German language and the roots of German traditions were growing into the Romantic movement. Similar to the present Académie Française, concerned with retaining French identity, so was in part the Frankfurter Nationalversammlung, the Frankfurt National Assembly or Parliament, concerned with forming German identity and a growing national movement. You could probably parse this at different dates, but most often the date I've seen is Germany would not really be officially unified until 1871 or so. But the Frankfurt Parliament was an early attempt, being the first freely elected parliament for all German states, including Austria, if I'm remembering correctly. At this assembly, and a premier seat directly in the middle of the theater was a chair reserved not for any party or even a person of great office. In a setting seeking to form a nation of German speakers, it was a seat for a man who could discern what was German, language-wise, and could similarly say what was not German. It was a seat for a philologist, the famous Jakob Grimm. And Grimm had already proven his worth to the German people with he and his brother's authentic fairy tales volumes. He also codified the so-called Grimm's Law of comparative philology. This law, labeled as such, labeled as a law for its unfailing consistency, which has a German term I won't bother you with right now, but it connects the Germanic languages to the rest of the Indo-European family. It shows a relation of German and English to languages traditionally holding prestige, right? Those of Greek, Sanskrit, Latin, right? So that's a big thing. That's important at this time, right? I don't think most people care these days, but Grimm himself knew that he knew the past as a philologist more than an archaeologist or historian could really at the time. Words preserved in past, and I mostly mean prehistory here, I guess. Words preserved in present vernacular have utterances that echo with deep antiquity can kind of pierce this veil of prehistory. This was a revolution of sorts. Instead of one European culture cradled in classical antiquity, people came to envisage a plurality of European cultures, each rooted in the nation's vernacular and tribal origins. It was a renaissance concerned with something long past, with identity and nostalgia, with the rural folk, all themes of Romanticism, right? Grimm was used as the mediator of Germanness for things like the Frankfurt National Assembly in this case. So something very important for the zeitgeist concerned with national identity when Germany didn't quite have one. At least it wasn't quite so solidified like we think of it today. And even then, that's kind of a recent thing in some ways. But so nationalism itself is a rather nasty word to some in the later half of the 20th century, going into the 21st century. The cited, just put it, the National Socialist German Workers' Party, again, I won't give you the German, is largely to blame for such a pejorative sense of the word, especially in Germany today. This is, of course, the Nazi Party, most people recognize. While no philologists came out in support of the Nazis, the Nazis liked the outdated idea that Germans were Aryans, and that Germany was the land from which the mother tongue originated. Such an idea was put forth by Gustav Cosina. He, along with others, would then go on to make a conflation that race and linguistic lineage are inherently related. Philology would take the fall for this chauvinistic hubris and false assumption. Admittedly, a relatively insignificant victim when compared to the millions dead in genocide. However, evolutionary biology would not take a similar blame for the problems of the Nazi regime. But once Charles Darwin's Origin of Species was released in 1859, the romantic conviction that language was a defining factor in national identity was combined with new ideas about evolution and biology. Nowadays, such ideas are unfathomable and grotesque. Proto-Indo-European, the mother tongue in question, would have been spoken in Ukraine and Russia. Any German excuse, even in the 1930s, was just that. Even placing the Indo-Europeans on the Pontic steppe does not denote an Aryan people, what those who wrote the Rig Veda called themselves. The Indo-Iranian branch of Indo-European, which languages survive in the Middle East and India, are the true Aryans, as Tolkien so eloquently told Rutten and Leoning Verlag, who wished to publish The Hobbit in German but wanted proof of his Irish blood. He describes the race doctrine as pernicious and unscientific, and he's correct. And he told the would-be publisher, none of my ancestors spoke Hindustani, Persian, Gypsy, or any related dialects. The problem is that race here, again, is poorly defined, but however it's defined, languages are not normally sorted by race. Similarly, outmoded thoughts could be seen in other countries. William Morris, when speaking on his translation of the Saga of the Volsungs, the first in English, describes it as the great story of the North, which should be to all our race what the tale of Troy was to the Greeks. So it's a similar problem with not as bad of an outcome. This is, again, a largely romantic idea, and while the word race should be switched out, Morris is not completely off. Any Greek today should appreciate the Iliad, and much of the world does, of course. It is a tale of the best and worst of humanity. Similar to it is the Saga of the Volsungs, the Volsunga Saga and the Nibelungenlied. included here, or even Beowulf, right? In the latter, heroic deeds save the hall of Herod from sorceress and monstrous foes, but the eponymous hero dies and dooms his people because of too much chivalry, essentially. Morris should not have singled out race, but instead unified English speakers as a whole. Even at Morris's time during the Victorian period, there were many in the world who spoke English that were not English. The unifying factor of these stories is their language and their human element. Instead, he focuses on the North, you could say North, right, which can be seen as Germanic idea, right, in like the paintings of Caspar David Friedrich and the works of Goethe even. And there are ways to appreciate this spirit or general superculture without falling prey to nationalism. Regardless of the crimes of the Nazis, it was simple virtue signaling that kind of spelled the fall of philology. It was during the Romantic period that not just German and German nationalism was born, but William Riley Parker says it was also the birth of English as a language. Gerald Graff would laugh at philology for producing 82 pages of notes to the 102 pages of Shakespeare's Julius Caesar. In this modern attitude that Elfenbein says it led to English professors now studying everything except English. Where does it come from? Sorry, that's funny to me. It was the Romantics who first encountered fully standardized English, right? Such standardization was a block on imagination, and it was not the philologists who was to blame. The philologists were Romantics to a degree, right? They cared about language and literature, not just everyday standardized speech. I guess you could say like a linguist could potentially care about. Philology is also concerned with dialects, versions of language different from the standard. It was philology that told us modern English cold comes from the Mercian dialect of cald and not the West Saxon of child, or child, I guess, depending on who you ask. Similarly, is from dialect pronunciation that one does not rhyme with stone, though it retains the standard pronunciation in alone and a tone. In a world where simpler is better, philology is seen as too ambitious. Literary criticism alone cannot answer philosophical or sociological questions, and so that discipline simply made the questions disappear. Linguistics is not concerned with historicity and fits poorly under that umbrella, especially with its move towards semiotics, away from pronunciation and syntax. This was a specific movement away from philology by philologists and father of linguistics, Ferdinand de Saussure. This occurred between 1907 and 1911. Obviously, the demise of philology did not start with the Nazis, but simply ended with them. By modern demarcation disciplines, philology is no more holistic than anthropology. So, and we still appreciate anthropology. I've studied anthropology. While that discipline survives, of course, philology today would involve both science and art that are arbitrarily separated in universities. So modernism, in more general ways, has damaged the field of philology. Philology showcased a variety of human emotions in more than the standard forms of expression. Romantics used subjectivity to make art, and philology showcased how words themselves could be subjective. This subjectivity was not complete and was used to an extent for the dominant forms of English rhythm and poetry. Chaucer used iambic pentameter, and English still sounds lovely in such a meter, but modernism, once more subjective, and the beauty of complexity dropped out in favor of no rhymes and no meter. Similarly, philology can be simple and complex, and by today's standards would be a difficult thing to study, and so may be labeled dismissively as boring or unimportant. But it is pertinent to our post-romantic world. Today, the word man, for example, does not only denote males, but when in reference to humanity as a whole, it retains its more archaic form. Man originally meant person, and in this form, that means people, right? Not simply males, right? You know, humanity as man, right? As a whole, philology fell victim to the nationalism of the Romantic era, but showcases the love of the simple, subjective, the art of the daily, our words, you know, through association with Germans and their foibles of the 20th century, and the old astute men who studied the Germanic language of which English is a part, Germanic languages, I should say, the field would fall. Romantic nationalism led to this negative association undeservedly, but philology still retains other themes, the common folk, subjectivity, and sense of the sublime that comes from understanding historical worlds through text in the language they are written. Attempts at revival have been largely ineffective, but the world is less of a romantic place because of this undeserved hatred that fell upon philology. Of course, that's the end, basically. That might be a little topic, I guess, slightly different if you're looking at classical philology, but since I'm an English speaker, I'm speaking in English right now, Germanic philology is more pertinent. Of course, classical philology is Seems to be a little bit heading out as well, though. Okay, so just for those interested, I looked at the first chapter, I believe, for the Horse, the Wheel, and Language by David W. Anthony. This is 2008 from Princeton University Press. It's a really good book. I don't have any of his books on hand with me. I also looked slightly at J.R. Tolkien's biography by Humphrey Carpenter. I didn't actually include this in my citations, but I realized that I got probably some of my original ideas a couple of years ago, at least along the lines of William Morris from Philip Chase's dissertation, William Morris in Germanic Language and Legend, A Communal Ideal. I never even finished that, and I didn't cite it anywhere in here. But it reminds me to go read it. I finished it. Again, I mentioned Eugene Delacroix's La Liberté, guidant le peuple. So, anyways, Liberty leading the people. And then I looked at Andrew Elfenbein's Romanticism and the Rise of English from Stanford University Press 2009. I mentioned Victor Hugo's Les Mis. Joseph Learson's Literary Historicism, Romanticism, Philologists, and the Presence of the Past, which is from Modern Language Quarterly, Volume 65, Number 2, 2004, pages 221 to 243. Mentioned William Morris. Again, the Story of Sigurd and the Volsung, The Fall of the Nibelungs, is the one I was specifically talking about. You can find that for free online. And I looked at a little bit of Ferdinand de Saussure's Cours de linguistique générale, so French courses in general linguistics. Then this is actually what kicked off my research into this. Again, was a speech given by Michael Drought, Professor Drought, on Germanic philology, I guess I should say. And that was at Mythmoot 4 in 2007. You can find that on YouTube. I'll try to link that one for sure in this video description. And then I did look a little bit at the letters of J.R. Tolkien for that one quote from Tolkien as well. So this is mostly just, again, just kind of a intro topic that's very, very short. This is really short, everyone. Like it's 6 pages, I think. That's a really short essay. And so it's not super in depth, but hopefully it holds up. I got a good grade. So hopefully it holds up. And I was glad to be able to write about something I was interested in, but I want to know if anyone here is interested in this. I'm sure most of my viewers are not watching this right now, but I got my suit coat on, so I've come off as at least a little bit of an authority. So anyways, for those curious, I am kind of a philology student. I'm starting my MA here soon, but have been studying it kind of on my own, autodidactically, I guess, for a few years. So anyways, this has been Liam from Liam's Lyceum, and I will catch you next time.